Okay, so I have a new idea, and it's a skull with like a bullet coming out of it, and it's like shooting through, and you got all these like cool particles. I was thinking actually like a flower it would shoot through, and you get like flower petals and like a bit of an explosion here, an entry explosion on the other side. The problem is, this looks like garbage. I think when most non-artists are thinking about drawing, the perception is that you have this idea and you can just draw it out on the page. But when I have ideas, they're usually a little half-formed, kind of fuzzy around the edges. I'm not exactly sure what I'm looking for, so I need to explore to figure that out. On top of that, when you have a new idea, it's very likely that you'll encounter objects that you've never drawn before. So really the precursor to any good image is a bit of homework. So that's what I'm starting with. I'm fairly familiar with skulls, but it's always nice to get a few down anyways, using a reference. But what I really needed to explore was the bullet behavior, the way the bullet would interact with the soft petals and the hard skull. And you can already see how important practice is. If you look at the entry wound I tried to make in pink on that blue skull in the center, that's drawn out of my head. And it is very clear that I don't understand how this would actually work and interact. And all of those ones in blue that I've drawn around it are done with references, and they obviously look a lot better. So from each reference when I draw it, I'm trying to internalize the things that make it look the way it does. I will look back at my references, but I'll also reference my own drawings going forward. So with some of those bullet studies out of the way, I moved on to flowers next. My original idea was to use roses because that's kind of the classic skull and roses, but this is the time to explore. So I just looked up a bunch of different references of different flowers, and I was looking at lilies because they kind of look like they're already exploding out and shooting forward. So I thought that they would be a cool candidate to try out. But once I stuffed the flower into the eye socket, I don't know, it just wasn't really working for me. I tried drawing it a couple of different times, but in the end, it just wasn't leaving a good feeling in my gut. So I don't know, I'll probably stick with roses. I stopped recording after messing around with the green, but when I went in with purple, it was mostly to play around with flower explosions. I got this one, and I thought it looked really cool, so I tried it again here, but with a different petal shape. And I thought that was pretty cool, so I tried it on a skull after that. And when you're working at small scales like this, and you can't fit as many details as you'd like, you kind of have to do as much as you can to indicate to the viewer what's happening. So adding another flower here helps you to connect this idea with this more abstract idea. And as long as there's enough context and similarities between the shape design of these two pieces, it'll be enough for a viewer to intuit that this is a flower. But that definitely comes down to my skill as a shape designer. Anyways, so I tried that, and then I tried it again. I don't like this one as much. Here, I was also trying to figure out the cracks in the back, and I also did not like that. The next thing I did... next thing I did was this. I'm screwing around with the crack again, and I'm referencing more like this than anything else, and I'm liking that a lot. So that's looking cool. The flower is whatever. All in all, I think we're getting closer. And then the last thing I did over here, oh, well, I drew this guy after. Trying to move the entire flower away from the skull so that you see the profile of the skull, and the flower is just out here getting destroyed. And finally, down here, we've got the bullet, and I've pulled bits of the flower a lot further down the stream. So imagine this bullet is like here on this stream. you'd have flower bits out here. So I just wanted to play around with that. I actually like that. I'll probably play with like the path that these flower petals are taking, but this is promising. This I need to experiment with, and this is kind of closer to the base idea now. So with our preliminary research out of the way, it's time to move on to something a little more concrete. The first thing I'm going to do is try to restrict the size of my drawings to the size of the actual knives that I'll be working on. And that's easy enough to do. I just take a measurement as close to the heel as I can get, and I'll use that measurement to just create some guidelines going down the page. But oh man, that's tricky to do with a camera right in your face. And problem solved, so we can move on to drawing. Okay, so I started out with these green guys right here, and I used reference for these, and I was mostly just focusing on getting them in the correct scale. They're just going to be my baseline for the rest of my operations on this page. And you can see here, setting up this scale helps me to know the relative size of everything else that I need to make. So I went in with pink and figured out that I need to make this flower roughly 1 centimeter within this design. Next, I moved into purple and I fully sketched out the idea. Well, almost. I didn't get the flower here. But I wanted to see how everything would work together. I was really excited about these petals coming through on the other page, so yeah, I just saw it through. And here I also discovered that I want to have more particles coming up above the skull, which I wrote out here. So I decided that I need to shrink the head in order for this design to work. So next I went in with blue and I tried the whole thing again, and I really like this. Yeah, this looks great, and it's basically what I'm going for. So after that sketch, I went in with pink to just basically recreate this skull, because I wanted to draw over it and start to really figure out the flower. This is when I started to get worried. This is really small, and I wasn't sure if it was going to work, basically. So I took a break and came back realizing I was being kind of dramatic. This one is very small compared to like my actual working size. So I tried drawing it again here in purple, and even this is undersized, but I've got this flower in and this more detailed flower, and it's looking okay here. It's still not big enough though, and I'm still unsure. And I went back in with blue. So even here, I still have a bit of space up here that I could be playing with, but this is more realistic in terms of size, and I think that I'm going to be okay. So I stopped panicking about the details being too small, and I'm more secure about the idea. Looking for another color to use, and oh, I've had this pencil for 2 years now, and I haven't even sharpened it yet. So let's find out how it looks. The next thing I wanted to think about was the jaw in relation to the top of the skull. I thought that if I could like skew the jaw in relation to the skull, I could make it feel more dynamic. So I ended up sketching out a couple of different jaws. Where are they? Over here. And I just couldn't make it work, so, you know, worth exploring, but just didn't pan out for me in the end. And I was feeling pretty comfortable at that point, so I stopped recording, but I did go on to explore different head positions in 3D space, like different tilts and whatever. In this process, I didn't mean for this, but I wasn't drawing in the bottom jaw just because I was trying to save some time and just explore these different like directions. But by eliminating the bottom jaw, I bought myself a lot more space. And you can see here and here, I really filled them out properly versus with the jaw. So I opted for this. Being able to make the skull larger like this means I can make the flowers themselves larger, so I can get more details into those tight spaces. So this is going to work out really well for me. And then the last thing I did was try out different flower shapes. for this guy. If I liked any of these, then they would determine this, which would determine the shapes for the petals for this one as well, since they're supposed to be the same. I ended up liking the rose with the pointed tips, so I'm going to go for that. I've never worked with a 7-inch Zwilling Pro before, so I'm going to quickly take some measurements before I proceed. And this will just help me to accurately draw the knife when I move on to the next step. So I just freehand the knife so I have something to put my measurements up to. It's just a very basic diagram. When I'm setting up documents or importing or exporting work, it's nice to have these numbers in the back of my mind so that I can tell at a glance if something is wrong. And I'll quickly drop it into my computer. I skipped ahead a bit, but I used the measurements that I made to create some boundaries to work within. And then I went in with pink and started sketching the actual profile. Then I started in on my final line work and we're almost home free. From here on out, everything is pretty easy going because I've already done all the hard work. I know exactly what I want to put on the blade and I've practiced drawing it a bunch of times, so it should be fairly simple to transfer everything over to the knife now. And painting these concepts is definitely one of my favorite parts of the entire process. It's one thing to sketch out the pattern or even make the black and white cut paths, which you'll see in my next video. But this is the first time I really get to visualize what the pattern is going to look like when it's done in real life. And on top of that, digital painting is just like one of my favorite things to do. It's relaxing, it's simple, it's quiet. I can put on an audiobook or a live stream or something and just have fun doing it. And I'm getting into the final concept sketch here. And working digitally is beautiful because I can just draw right on top of my other work on a new layer, and I don't have to worry about messing anything up. Even if I screw up any of these features, I can just delete them completely and redraw whatever I need to. I'm using a program called Concepts, and I'm working on a Windows Surface Book. So I'm drawing directly on my screen with a stylus for this part of the drawing. In a bit, I'm going to move into another program called Krita to do all my final painting and touch-ups. Concepts is great for sketching out ideas and like simple drawings and paintings, but because it's vector-based, it's got a lot of limitations when it comes to freeform painting. And Krita, on the other hand, is fantastic, but I can't really draw directly on my screen in that program. It relies on the keyboard and the mouse a lot, so I prefer to use my Wacom tablet and just draw the old-fashioned way, I guess. The old-fashioned digital way. What a time we live in. So we've made it into Krita, and I'm starting my cleanup and just kind of touching up all of the places that I want to. And this is a bit of a departure from this art style, but I've actually painted the line work itself as well and blended it into the actual forms. I like the way that it softens the overall look of the concept image, and I think it's something that I'll continue to do in the future. The main addition that I'll do in this program is painting in the negative space in a slightly darker tone. And that's just to simulate the contrast and surface finish that you'll see on the actual blades once they're etched. In a relative sense, the etched portions of the blade will be kind of rough, whereas the unetched portions will be smooth and have a higher surface finish. Because of that, light bounces off of the two surfaces differently, creating the contrast that lets you see the image. And that'll do it for this video. I love the way this is turning out so far, and I can't wait to get on to the next step. In the next video, I'll do the production artwork and we'll actually start to see these masks applied to the knives. So if that catches your interest, be sure to like and subscribe and stay tuned for the next one. Peace.